Hey,
Hi,
it's Tash and Carly,
and you're listening to Motherhood,
not as we planned.
So get comfy, grab a cup of tea,
Or a glass of wine, and let's start talking about all the things too many of us avoid discussing. So, guys, we have been so excited for this guest, and from the responses that we've got, it seems like everyone's really excited as well. So,
yeah, I think we get a lot of questions that we can't answer. We don't have the qualifications or the knowledge.
Yeah, so
trying to get Tracy.
Yeah, so welcome Tracy, also known as the Legal Queen. She is a family lawyer, solicitor, and we're going to be able to pretty much have her answer. I mean, we've got so many questions. We're going to try and get through as many as possible. But welcome. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolute pleasure. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so should we go straight into all the questions?
Yeah. All right. So I want to change my children's surname to double barrel to include mine, but my ex won't allow it. Where do I stand as a mum whose children don't have my surname?
So the first thing you have to think about is, does dad have parental responsibility? Does the ex have PR? Because if they do have PR, then you need their permission. So check that first, because if they don't have PR, and not every ex does, then you don't need their permission. So you can go ahead and do it. If they do have parental responsibility and therefore you need the permission and they won't give it, you need to make a court application. And what you're essentially saying to the court is, look, judge, can I have an order whereby the court give me permission to change the child's name? And all the court are going to be looking at is, well, is it in the child's best interest? And generally having a double-barreled is, because it recognises both parents.
Yeah.
And is doing something like that quite expensive?
Not if you do it yourself. And I think that the one thing that I've found starting the whole social media campaigns that I do is that people instantly think that court and anything legal is really scary, intimidating. You've got to be really super smart to be able to do it. Family court have we're trying to change all of that. So if you can't afford legal representation, and let's be honest, so many people can't now, you can do it yourself. All you need to do is know the forms. And that's generally where I come in. So lots of people come onto my social media and say, this is what I want to do. What's the name of the form? And then you can download and submit it. And then the cost is just the court fee. And typically, court fees are around the £200 mark for children's applications. The rest of it you can do yourself.
Okay, I had no idea that. I'm not saying £200 is cheap, but I thought you were going to say like 2,000.
No. And then the other thing that I try to share with people is, whilst that's the standard court fee, if you are on a low income, you can fill out what we call the EX160, which is a fee remission. So you may be able to get it for free. So you'd fill out your EX160 form, send it into court. Court will have a look at it and go, yeah, you qualify. And they'll just look at what benefits you're on, what your income is, etc. So in some cases, you won't even have a court fee.
Wow, that's really good to know.
Really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. If I've agreed 50-50 kid split with the dad, is there anything I can do to change it now?
Has that split been put into a financial order? That's what I'd want to know. Because if it's in a financial order following the divorce, and just to be clear for your listeners, ladies, when we get a divorce, all that does is bring your marriage to an end. The second part of it is getting your financial order. That's the most important part from a legal point of view, because that's the bit that severs the financial ties. So if that split of 50-50 has been recorded in an order and the order has been sealed by the court, really hard to change it. But if we don't have an order, absolutely, yeah, it's all up for the taking then.
Right. Can I actually ask, because I'm in the process, we're both in the process at the moment of getting a divorce. Yeah. And I'm at that point now where we're finalising that last bit, the financial order.
Yeah.
Would you say, and would you suggest that you should not finalise the divorce before having the financial order sorted? Is there a benefit of not, or is it one completely separate?
The legal preference is always, let's get the financial order while you're still married. Because if you get your divorce before your financial order is finalised, anything can happen. Okay, so you can, once you're not married anymore, the laws change. And let's say the other party says, you know what, I'm not signing the financial order now, and disappears for 12 months. And it does happen. We are then on the back foot because legally we're not married anymore, but we still don't have that financial order. So the biggest or the most popular example I give is that if you get your divorce and let's say you're still 12 months sorting out the finances, you lose all that pension entitlement that potentially your ex is paying into. But if you stay married, you still get that. So the preference is to stay married. But like the other side of that, ladies, is that so many people do get divorced, and that's okay. We can still get the financial order. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. I've got the thing through to say I can move on to the next part. It's been like 20 weeks since I filed, but our financial order is nowhere near we're nowhere near agreeing. So it's really handy.
So would your advice be for anyone going through that is try and get that financial order sorted before finalising the divorce?
100%. 100%. So many people rely on trusting the ex and say, you know what? Or the other example is we've got nothing to divide. No point getting it traced. We've got absolutely nothing to divide. When actually 5 years' time, you might have something. You might have won the lottery. You might have got a big payout redundancy or a personal injury payout. Who knows? Inheritance. If you haven't got that financial order, doesn't matter how long you've been divorced, 5, 10, 15 years, your ex can still come back and make a claim. So absolutely stay married, get the financial order, then get your final order in divorce.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, no. Close one. So someone said here, what are the key things to think about before actually starting the divorce process?
The key things to think about, I think generally we're sorting out children first. So when we look at finances, we are always looking at the needs of the parties, okay? And the question one for me is always, if we have children, who are they going to live with? Because if they're living with, let's say, mom, and I say that not because I favour moms, and I always get this on my social media, you're all for the moms. It's just in our society, typically children stay with mom. So if they are staying with mum, then mum by default has a greater need. So that I think is always your first consideration. Who are the children going to live with? Or is it going to be a shared care? That's fine too. And then from there, if we jump straight to what the court's looking at, we're just looking at what the assets are. We're going to throw it all on the table, and then we're going to look at who needs what. Maybe somebody needs the house more than the cash. Maybe somebody wants the pension more than the house. So we're going to try and accommodate people's wants, but needs are a priority. So look at what it is that you need. And when we're looking at getting that percentage, 50-50, 60-40, the key factors for us as solicitors are, how long is this marriage? What is each party able to earn? Do we have somebody that maybe works part-time and somebody that's on a 6-figure salary? Do we have any medical conditions here? Do you know what I mean? Do we have limited equity in that house? In other words, are we looking maybe to leave the person with the children in the house, and we'll think about selling it when the youngest is 18. So it's about identifying what it is that you need. Maybe it's some spousal maintenance, because if you don't work, if you are at home with the children and you're totally reliant on your spouse's income, maybe we need some maintenance for that adjustment period just to kick in, so we can just let the dust settle. Do you know what I mean? So, and it will be different for every family. You know, family law, it's not one size fits all. It's very bespoke, which is why I always say to people, if you can't afford legal representation, at the very least, just try to get that 1 hour consultation, just so that we can say to you, this is what you're entitled to. This is what you're going to, chances are, get from court.
Is there anyone that people can go to if they can't afford legal representation? Like any free advice, or is there anywhere that we can point people to?
Yeah, it's a bit of a myth. So you can always get your free 15 minutes or free 30 minutes. Lots of law firms around the country will offer that, but it won't be advice, okay? I'll come on to why it won't be advice in a second. What that will give you is signposting. A lot of what I do on social media is just signposting, just telling people where to go, what forms to use, how much it's going to cost. The reason that we can't give free advice is because as professionals, we have insurance. So we have what we call professional indemnity insurance. And in order for that insurance to kick in, God forbid we give wrong advice, you have to be a client. So you have to have signed our T's and C's, and chances are put some money on account. So we would be slightly negligent to start handing out free advice because we haven't had the opportunity to ask you the questions and find out your background and the context of your divorce. So the free 15 minutes or 30 minutes would just be guidance and signposting.
Right. And people really can find that on your social media, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we will
try not to use Dr. Google because obviously there's loads of stuff out there and there is a lot of conflicting. People get really confused and say, but I read this. Or try not to use friends and neighbours because their divorce experience and their settlement will not be the same as yours. It's very bespoke.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, we'll definitely, if anyone listening to this is struggling financially to try to find ways of getting that advice, we will make sure that we inform them as to kind of to look at your page. And
I found your page so helpful for that. Like, good. I browsed through them and I've had questions like come up because it's before you get a divorce, you don't know any of these things. Like I didn't even know where to start with the divorce process. And I guess maybe that could be a question is what is the first point of call to start the divorce process?
So if you want to do it yourself, you would go on to Gov website, so gov.co.uk, I think it is, or gov.uk. And if you simply type in divorce, it will not only give you the divorce petition, which you can now upload online directly to the court, but it also gives you some helpful notes as to what to do and the entire process. So that's the first place to start. And you remember that you can't get your financial order that we've spoken about until you've started that divorce process. A lot of people say to me, we've separated, but we don't want to get divorced for lots of different reasons, but can we sort out the financial order? Not really. You have to start that divorce process.
Okay.
Because we can't have the financial order if you're still married. You see what I mean? So it just won't come into effect until we've got you divorced.
And the divorce now that you can do online, how much is that? It's something like £5.
So the court fee is £593. Again, check if you're entitled to fee remission. That's the EX160 form. But if you're not, then it's £593. And that will be payable by the person that completes and submits the divorce petition. A lot of people say to me, oh, can we share the cost? You can, absolutely, because you can do a joint application for divorce. But ultimately, one of you is going to have to pay and then get the 50% from the other person.
If you do a joint application, is there a way for it to be split or still someone has to pay it? And then if the other one agrees, they can transfer you half the money?
So typically, because you're dealing with the computer, it's going to want one person's card details.
Yeah.
So what you find is that one person will pay and then the other person would just give their 50% to that person.
Fine.
Yeah.
This might be a bit of a hard one to answer because it seems quite vague, but this person's put, is it better to sell the property or let him buy me out of our family home?
So it depends on the needs, doesn't it? So if he can afford to buy you out, that's going to be the starting point. If he can afford to take on the existing mortgage and then take on your 50% of the equity, then fine if he wants to stay there. But if he can't afford to do all that, his income won't allow him to get all of that on his own, then the property is going to have to be sold ultimately. You have a right to get your share of the equity. And as much as they may want to stay, a lot of times the other side, I'm thinking about my clients, the other side that say, oh, yeah, but I love this house and I want to stay. Yeah, but if you can't afford to buy my client out, then that's a consequence of divorce, I'm afraid.
When it comes to selling a property that you're both on the mortgage, you both own it together.
Yeah.
Does the split when you sell it tend to be different depending on who has the children more?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If we take the typical scenario that dad is working full time and mom isn't working, and we've got a couple of children that are maybe still at primary school, we're going to be moving away from 50-50. and looking at potentially getting mum 60, 65%. I mean, there are other factors that we take into account. And the reason for that, and, you know, I get all the dads on my social media going, well, that's because the court favours women. And it doesn't. The reason for that is that if dad is working full time, he's got a much better mortgage capacity. He could go out and get a much bigger mortgage than mum. You know, it may be that mum can't get a mortgage at all. And I'd say mum and dad, not because there's a favouritism for women, and I always repeat myself, but it's because in our society, typically it's the mum that stays at home with children. You know, in other countries it may be different, but I speak about sort of England where I practice. So yeah, there is a definite shift in favour of the person that has the children, but for good reason, you know, not because court favours that person.
Yeah, makes sense. Someone's put here, child maintenance is not enough for what we need. Yeah. How do I get him to pay more?
Well, the CMS stays firmly outside of family court. So we would never go to family court in respect of child maintenance. If we need a top-up, then we're going to be looking at what we call child periodical payments. But it has to be specifically for something, okay? It may be that we're looking at spousal maintenance. So not necessarily a maintenance for the child, but for the spouse. So again, that's based on need. Like I said earlier, everything's based on the needs of that particular individual. So if, again, we take the person that has that financial need, we look at what they've got coming in, adding up any part-time wage, child maintenance, benefits or whatever, then we look at what they have to pay out. And that deficit, we're going to be asking the other side for. Now, that's the first part of it. The second part is, well, can the other side afford that? Because obviously they have a need. They've got to pay their bills and they've got to get themselves to work, etc. So we would hope that the deficit can be covered by maybe a spousal maintenance. But if it's a specific payment, maybe it's a private school fee, maybe it's, you know, dance classes or stuff that the child's always done, then we can say to the other parent, well, we've always done this, so would you be able to maybe pay half of that for me? And we call that periodical payments for the children.
What happens if when you're organising the financial order, it's based on my ex's salary, but then their salary is going to increase over time?
That depends on how long that maintenance is going to be payable for. If we're talking about maintenance, and we might not be, but I'll roll with maintenance because we've just had a maintenance question. If we're talking about spousal maintenance and we agree that's only going to be payable for, say, 2 or 3 years, and that increase happens within that 2 or 3 years, we build that into the order, okay? Because we know about that. We know about that information. But we've got to weigh that up against the need. It always comes back to the need. So if your needs are £500 a month and your spouse is paying that to you, does it really matter if the income of the spouse goes up? Because your need is still being covered. So again, I'd need to know a little bit more context about, as that goes up, are we then going to be entitled to more? Are we going to index link that? Or is it that actually our basic needs are covered? That's probably a bit of a complicated answer, but...
No, that's really interesting. So in theory, just say as two people are getting divorced and they've got children and the dad is on a particular salary.
Yeah.
So, and they've agreed, this is how much you're getting because this is how much you are going to need for the children. But then as the years go on, and obviously he's only going to pay that amount until the last child is 18. As the years go on, his salary increases. Does the mum not see any of that increase because her needs are already being met? Is she not entitled to those increases?
She will see an increase in the child maintenance because the CMS guidelines, it's a percentage. So from the child maintenance perspective, it will go up.
Fine.
But whatever is in your financial order, if we haven't built in the opportunity for growth, then no. What I mean by that is if in our financial order, we don't recognise as dad's income goes up, so will our maintenance, then no, the financial order will set it in stone. So the listeners out there that are in exactly that position, speak to your solicitor. Because the first thing I'd be thinking about, if one of my clients said, and he's just about to get a promotion and his salary is going to go from 100 grand to 150 grand, first thing I'd be thinking about is, well, hang on, his mortgage ability is going to increase. So actually, maybe I don't want to link in increasing maintenance for my client, but maybe I could justify getting a bigger portion of the equity in the house, because my girl needs that right now, whereas his mortgage capacity is about to, double in the next 12 months. Do you see what I mean? And that's why it's really bespoke. That's why you just need to go back to your solicitor and say, just flagging it, we might not be able to do anything with it, but I do know promotion's looming. That happens quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. But like, say, for example, someone is self-employed and someone has a job that they are definitely like going to get promoted, like they're going to get promotions. Obviously, the person who's self-employed has less mortgage capacity.
Yeah.
So you could tie that into the financial order.
Potentially, yeah, absolutely. But, potentially, because your argument before the court, if you are in, I always use the court as an example, is that their mortgage capacity is going to increase quite quickly, quite soon, within the next sort of 6 to 12 months. So therefore, can we recognise that now? And could we have slightly more of the equity?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a potential there to run that. Yeah, for sure. The other thing to remember as well is that if you have child maintenance built into your financial order, once your financial order is 12 months old, the CMS element drops off. So what I mean by that is you can still go back to CMS and have them recalculate your allowance.
Okay.
That makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good to know. My ex-husband is trying to force sale on marital home, but I'm not in a position to do that. Youngest child is 4. What are my options?
So whenever we are dealing with finances on divorce, the 3 areas that we're looking at is housing needs, income needs, and capital needs. So if by selling that property, mum and child have nowhere to live, there's no way the court's going to make that order, because the order has to be fair and it has to be reasonable. So a lot of times, whilst the ex is making an application for an order for sale, I'm always saying to people, don't be intimidated by that. Anybody can make any application. The real question is, will that application succeed? And if it means that her and the child are out on the street and they can't afford rent in the area, or for example, a lot of people in London, even if they sell their home, they just can't afford to rent. Kids are having to move schools and all sorts of stuff's going on. Court's not going to make that order. So, she, at the moment, I would say she doesn't have to do anything. Take some advice, obviously, but there's no guarantee you'll get that order for sale.
Okay, that's interesting. Do you have a right to say as a mum if someone isn't allowed to see the child, not their dad, but a relative to the dad?
Yeah, because you have parental responsibility as the mum, or if it was the dad, and you can exercise that parental responsibility by saying, I don't think it's appropriate for my child to be in that person's company for whatever reason. There might be some drug or alcohol abuse, or there might be foul language, or there just might be welfare concerns. So absolutely you can. You can. Now remember, what the question I get a lot of times is, well, my ex is now with a new partner and I don't want my kids to have anything to do with a new partner. While the children are with your ex-partner, remember that they can also exercise their parental responsibility. So if they feel it appropriate, you kind of have to let that one go. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Unless you've got genuine welfare concerns, then of course you could step up.
Husband is the only one named on the deed, mortgage, bills, etc. What is the percentage split when we divorce?
It doesn't really matter who is named at land registry or on the deed. If it's one person, what I would say to the person who's not named is make sure you register your home rights. And that's a HR1 form. So what that does, it tells land registry that I'm not named on the deed. However, I am a spouse and this person cannot sell the property without me being informed. So it will effectively block a sale. So that's the first thing. The second part of that question was, what percentage split am I going to get? Well, that will depend on the needs of the parties. So that's going to depend on earning capacity, length of marriage, age of the parties, etc., etc. So the percentage question isn't tied into who's named at land registry. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say.
What's the cheapest way to get divorced if you cannot use legal aid and finances are tight?
Well, legal aid, you're not going to get legal aid for divorce anymore. So legal aid in family law sort of got rid of it around about 2013, so about 10 years ago. The only way you're getting legal aid, and for those listeners that don't know what legal aid is, it's free legal help essentially, is where there's been domestic violence involved. So if you are purely getting a divorce and we've got no domestic violence, the cheapest way to do it is to do it yourself. You can do it all online. Last April, so April 2022, we saw the new divorce laws coming in, the new no-fault divorce. Do it online. The court will send the divorce petition to your spouse. They can complete their little bit online. £593 is the court fee. Unless you qualify for fee remission, check out that EX160. That's the cheapest way to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it important to get divorced, separated 2 years and can't really afford it at the moment with 2 young kids? In my opinion, it's just a piece of paper. What are your thoughts?
So legally, you are still married. And if we think about when we get married, we are entering into a contractual relationship. So what belongs to you actually belongs to your spouse. And in the same, when we're getting a divorce and we're separating it, regardless of whose name it's in, we've just spoken there about the house being in one person's name. That doesn't matter. You're still going to be entitled to a share of it. So that continues, because if you're separated, you're still married. So if you're paying into a pension every month, even though you're separated and you're not living together, legally, your spouse could claim half that pension. So I would be saying that whilst you may be struggling to afford the court fee for the divorce, long term, is it actually costing you more? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Like if someone went and won the lottery,
You'd then have
you're entitled to it, aren't you?
Matrimonial asset, potentially, you could argue. Now, to get into the nitty-gritty, it's a post-separation asset. But if someone's got a need, we can certainly make a claim to that lottery win, for sure.
What's the law on taking your children abroad if you're not married to their father or you're not with their father?
So the married bit isn't relevant at all. If dad has parental responsibility and you don't have a child arrangements order, and I'll come back to why that's important in a second, you're going to need his permission to take the child abroad. Also give some thought to where you're going. So some countries you can literally walk through, Spain, France, whatever, you can just walk through with your child's passport, that's fine. Other countries want to know why you're travelling alone. Have you got a letter from the other parents? Always check where you're going and what their entry requirements are. But if your ex has got PR, out of sheer courtesy, I would be saying, look, planning on going on a summer holiday, blah, blah, blah. If we've got a child arrangements order in place and the child, by way of that order, lives with you, you can actually go on holiday for up to 4 weeks without the other parent's permission. And that will be written in your order. Okay, so that's a given. So it might be that you have an order, in which case you can go for up to 4 weeks. If you don't have an order, I would be getting the other parent's permission. And look, if you can't get the other parent's permission and they force you to go to court to get an order to go on holiday, no judge in the land is going to say you're not going. Of course you can go on holiday. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as I say, always check where you're going as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I got a letter both times.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Well, just in case. I just thought.
Just in case, yeah.
Yeah, it was fairly easy to do. And I just thought going on holiday on my own with 2 kids gave me anxiety anyway. I thought the last thing I want to do is get there and be like,
I didn't. I did not think of it.
And that's interesting because you had your letter, you were all prepared. Did you get asked for the letter?
No, not one.
No. Yeah, that's it, you said. Where other countries, they will stop and say, why are you travelling alone? Have you got permission? Got a court order? So it does depend on where you're going.
And can they sometimes, if you're like, oh, I don't have anything, can they sometimes say, well, sorry, you can't go?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
I went away and I didn't even think to get anything.
So my understanding, and again, I'm not, specialist in border control, but my understanding is that you can leave England, the border control won't stop you from leaving. It will be the entry requirements of the country that you're going to.
If we're not married and we've lived together in his house, do I have any rights if we're now separating?
Only if you've made a significant financial contribution. Okay, so always think of it as rent. If you're paying your way, if you are contributing towards the food and half of the bills, etc., then no, because you're not married. But if maybe you've paid for central heating to go in, or new windows to be fitted, or maybe you put 20 grand towards the extension that he had on the side of the kitchen or whatever, if it's a significant financial contribution, then yes, you could claim what we call the beneficial interest. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And you know what? That's really important. I'm glad that you asked that question, because marriage is on the decline. More and more couples are simply living together. And a real live example was a client that I had. Relationship had been 22 years. I acted for mum. There was 5 children of this relationship. And for the whole 22 years, they lived in his house. She had decorated it, nested, made it her home. The relationship broke down and she walked away with absolutely nothing because she hadn't made a significant financial contribution. So it's so important, regardless of being male or female, if you are living somewhere long term and that property isn't in your name, think about that. Think about how you fix that. And I know that people don't want to think about if the relationship breaks down. It doesn't have to break down. That person could pass away. You're still not entitled to that property, even though you might have lived there for 30 years. And it happens. I think that's the thing. If you're not aware that these things happen, you automatically, we all do. You just think, well, never happened to me.
I thought it was more about how long you had cohabitated for rather than what money you had put into something.
And you know what? That is the biggest family law myth. I did a video recently. I was on holiday a couple of weeks ago and I did a video on that. And it was, somebody said to me, what's the most common myth? And it's that we have this common law man and wife, this magical world where if we've been living together for 10 years, then we're just automatically common law man and wife. And it's not true. You are.
And I'm assuming there has to be like proper evidence of that.
Yeah,
financial contribution,
and it has to be significant. It can't be like 500 quid or £1,000. It's got to be significant. It's got to be a contribution that actually puts value on the property.
Yeah.
Okay. So the examples I give is: by paying this, are we going to increase the value of the property? Are we putting in a new driveway? Are we putting in new windows? It's got to be a significant contribution.
So it can't just be like the aircon.
No.
I think that's a very significant contribution in the summers that we're having. So I know that, that is really interesting. And I don't want what I'm about to ask you for anyone listening to think it sounds like going into a relationship, almost planning, well, if this ends. But would you say for those reasons, it's safer to get married?
Look, I do this job all day, every day. So I always see the negative. I'm doing divorces. I'm seeing people that break up. So I have children, and when they get into relationships and start buying property with it, I am going to be there with the safeguards ready, because with the best will in the world, it happens. Mm-hmm. And it's not that you go into it thinking it's going to happen, but in the case that it does happen, you have got to protect yourself. It's an investment that you're making, a financial investment. You're investing your time. There has to be some safeguarding. Let's not be that naive to think that it may never happen. To me, it might. And you know what? If it doesn't, what harm is it? If the relationship doesn't break up, that's fine. You just shove whatever your contract you put, shove it in the drawer, forget about it. It's okay.
So what you're saying that you would almost put like a contract in place when you buy a property if you're not married?
Absolutely. So they're called cohabitation agreements. And we would put a bit like having a prenuptial agreement, but it's a cohabitation agreement.
For the property?
For the couple. So that in the event the relationship breaks down, let's be very clear about what we're both walking away with. And the contract or the agreement also covers what we're going to put in while we're together. So we might get gifts given to us, joint gifts, Christmas presents that's maybe, I don't know, a new dining table or something. If the relationship breaks down, who's keeping that? What are we doing there? What's happening? What if we start to take out a credit card debt to go on a holiday and then we split up and the credit card hasn't been paid back? Who's going to pay that back? So it will cover things like that, things that you might not automatically think of.
And what did you say that's called?
Cohabitation agreement.
Okay. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, this is an interesting one. We're not married, one salary family. He insists that the kids should live with him because I don't have a job.
Then how? Right. I think the first question there is what's in the children's best interest. So what's been the routine, first of all? When we were together, what was the routine? Even though we're all living in the same house, who was the main carer of the children?
I guess it's going to
start there.
Her if she's not working.
Yeah. So we have to start there. It's already a bit traumatizing when mom and dad aren't together anymore, for the children, I mean. And to then shift them from their routine, which legal speak is status quo. So that's got to be your starting point there. What is the best routine for the children? And then once we've got that decided, the finances almost just slot into place then. Do you know what I mean? Because then it's really easy to identify what needs we have. What needs does the parent have who has the children, and what needs does the other parent have? So start with the kids is what I would say first.
Fine. What are your thoughts now on this whole non-fault divorce? Do you think it is better?
Yeah, I think we needed it for such a long time, because before we had the no fault, we had to pick one of five, and they were 2 year separation. Well, that didn't apply to everybody. 5 year separation, that didn't apply to everyone. Desertion, that was very rarely used. Adultery, trouble with adultery is you had to get the person that committed adultery to sign to say that they'd done it. So that was really hard. And then unreasonable, I know, can you imagine that? And then unreasonable behaviour. So that was our most popular one.
What, the unreasonable behaviour?
The unreasonable behaviour, yeah, because if it was adultery, we would say that the other person had had inappropriate relationships. Do you know what I'm saying? We couldn't use the word adultery. But the downside of that unreasonable behaviour is that already we've got the parties at loggerheads before we've even sorted out the finances.
Yeah.
And look, divorce is divorce. The reasons that we would put in the petition were seen by nobody. It was seen by your lawyer and the judge. So did it really matter? Because the biggest, I suppose, culprits in all of that were those that simply fell out of love with each other. They had no basis. They then had to wait until they were separated for 2 years. How fair is that? They want to move on. They want to sort out the finances. And you've got lawyers going, well, unless we make up some stuff, unless we, unreasonable behaviour, was he unreasonable? I mean, I'm not saying we'd make stuff up, but do you know what I mean? Can you think of anything that they've done in the past that we can use? It was really hard. Now, if you decide you want to get divorced, fine. Who are we to question? Your marriage is irretrievably broken down. It's a decision for you both. Then let's just move on. We're not going to apportion blame. How is that helpful, I think?
Yeah, that's so true. I never really thought of it in that way. I think I saw it as a bit of a negative for someone that was maybe pushed into getting a divorce because their partner had an affair, and then they weren't seeing any benefit of he's had an affair, so I'm going to be able to say that I want X, Y, and Z because it's his fault. That's how I saw it. I never really knew that side of it.
And when the new no fault came in, you did have those people that said, that's so not fair. I want to use adultery. I want to blame him or her for the breakdown of the marriage. Yeah. But two things to remember there. That's an emotive response. That's how you feel in the moment. No one's going to know. When you're chatting to friends and you say, I'm divorced, people never said, on what grounds was it? You just, I'm divorced, that's fine. And the second thing, and more importantly, we don't use conduct when we're sorting out the finances. So it really doesn't matter how horrible your ex has been. It won't influence the finances. The finances will always be based on what have we got available and what do they need? How can we best service housing, income and capital?
And you know what? I didn't know that. I think I'm so, you watch these films, like these old films back in the day, and you see like the ex-husband and wife sitting in the table with their like solicitor next to them, and they're like, she wants the house because you did this, and he's like, fine, she can have it. I think I just always like envisioned that that's kind of like what divorce was like. You know, he's done that, so she gets this, but it's obviously not.
What influences that is that a lot of those dramas or movies that we see are American based, and in America it's very different. So in America, children is part of the whole divorce scenario, whereas in England it isn't. And I think conduct is taken into account.
Okay, that's what it's all those American chick flicks I've been watching.
What are you watching?
I don't know.
And I've got two really good questions that have just come up. So, how to sort a divorce when we're still living together but leading very separate lives now? How do we sort finances, etc.?
You can still sort it out. I mean, and that's more common than people think, because where we just have one property and we can't afford to move out, one person to move out and rent somewhere else, we can still put the financial order into place. We can sell the property and build into that order. When the property's sold, you get 50% or you get 60% or whatever it might be. So we still do it. Lots of couples will maybe take separate bedrooms and do the paperwork while they're still living in the same property. It's possible. And if that's your only option, you find a way to make it work, really. Mm-hmm. Legally, it has no bearing on the legal side of things. Not at all.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I could do that. I think I'd lose my mind. Right. Can my ex-husband enforce a 50-50 split of children's time?
Can he enforce it? That tells me that there's already an order in place that's being breached and he wants to enforce it. Or if she's saying, can he make me?
I reckon that means, can he make me?
Yeah. Again, let's look at what the status quo is. Let's look at what the routine has been throughout the relationship and what it's been maybe post-separation. If it's not in the children's best interest, then no, he would make his application to the court. But again, the magic question is, will his application succeed? And if we're veering away from the routine, it probably won't succeed.
Yeah. So is that what it generally comes down to? It's kind of like, what have the children been used to while the parents have been together?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's interesting.
Absolutely. Now, there's a lot of parents that will say, we've completely agreed on a shared care arrangement and it's going to be a 50-50. That's fine. The court won't interfere. If parents are in agreement, we have what's called the no order principle. So the court won't make a child arrangements order. Why do they need to? Parents are in agreement, that's fine. It's where the parents aren't in agreement and the matter comes before the judge. Obviously, it's going to be very biased. Dad's going to have his view, Mom's going to have her view. So the judge is always focused on, okay, what have the children been used to? How should we continue that?
Right. I have a question for you. What are your thoughts on mediation?
I'm a big fan of mediation, a big fan. I think as soon as solicitors get involved, there's a tendency to polarize your position. This is my position. I'm very entrenched. These are my legal rights. This is what my lawyers told me I'm entitled to. And it can make negotiation a bit more difficult, whereas mediation approaches it, well, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you're looking for? And I tell you what else mediation does, which I think is really important. When we come to the end of a relationship, it's really hard to hear what the other person is saying. Our perception of what they mean can sometimes be distorted. So I think a good mediator will say to the other person, I think what he's trying to say is this, or I think what she's trying to say is this. And they will almost try to neutralize that emotion that's in the air and thereby facilitate the agreement. Do you know what I mean? So I'm a huge fan of mediation.
Okay.
Huge fan.
Good to know.
If you were only married for 5 years, do they have a claim to your pension?
Yes. So the law around pension is really clear. All contributions made during the lifetime of the marriage will be divided. So whatever contributions have been made.
Okay, so I know we've kind of touched on it, but someone said legal rights of children remaining in the family home until 18.
So the children don't have any legal rights to remain in the home. that decision remains with the adults. The adults are responsible for housing the children. The children don't have a right to the property, if that makes sense, because they're under 18. So how would they?
What happens if, as the children get older, and you've obviously got this agreement that the kids are at their dad every other weekend and one night in the week, and then as they get older, they don't want to go?
Yeah.
Is it just then tough on the parent, not the kids?
Yeah, it really is, because when they get to sort of, you find it when they get sort of 12, 13, 14, they start to vote with their feet. They're far too busy. They want to be out with their mates. They want to be playing computer games in their room. They don't want to do this whole going to dad's at the weekend and everything. Child arrangements orders will only go up to 16 anyway. So after that, but if you were to be making a child arrangements application, the child's 14, chances are the court's going to be guided by what the kid wants to do then. You know, they will listen to the voice of the child. That doesn't mean the child goes to court. That means that CAS, who are kind of the court social workers, will speak to the child and report back to the judge. Look, you know, he'll see dad when he wants to, or she'll visit mom when she wants to.
Right. And what if your agreement's been put in place when the children are, you know, like that 4 or 5 years old, and then once they get to that 10, 11, 12, they're a bit like, Mum, I don't want to go to dad. And if they then don't go, does the dad have the right to do something about it legally?
Yeah. So legally, you're breaching the order, okay? You're not allowing the children to go for contact, is what dad would say. So he would enforce that order. He would say, look, judge, I got an order 6 years ago. It's not being affected and I want it enforced. But of course, that would trigger an investigation. So the court would probably send CAS out, again, court's own social workers, to have a chat with the kids and say, what's going on? And then if the kids were like, well, I want to see my friends, or I want to do this, I want to do that, I've started rugby or football, I've got time, then CAS would feed that back to the judge. So there'd be no guarantee that the court would actually enforce that old order because the children have outgrown it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. School holidays and how to divide this evenly if both parents work.
Again, very bespoke to what the family needs. You know, typically we can't afford to take 3 weeks with one parent and 3 weeks with the other, because one parent might not be able to take 3 weeks off work, you know, all in a row, or you might not be able to afford the childcare. So again, what is in the best interest of the kids and what can the parents agree between themselves? Every family is going to have a different scenario. Sometimes we have grandparents getting involved because actually we need grandparents' support or aunties and uncles' support during the summer holidays because both parents are working, you know?
Yeah. If your ex isn't contributing at all financially since they left, can you she's done the thing again. If your ex isn't contributing at all financially since they left, can you go for more than 50% of the house and paying all the mortgage and everything for the kids?
So first question, I don't know if they're married. So if they're married, then we can start talking about percentage of houses. And then it comes down to need. What is it that you need? You know, if they're not contributing financially, is it worth us going to court getting an order? Because whilst we can get an order for spousal maintenance, for example, that they pay you £500, if they don't, you've got to enforce the order. So you're just trotting back to court all the time. Mm-hmm. So maybe the better remedy there is forget the spousal maintenance. I'll just take more of the equity in the house because actually I can't rely on you long term to keep paying me. But it always comes back to need. What is it that they need?
Yeah. So she's got the kids pretty much all the time, then essentially
her needs are going to be greater. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember a lot of the time I've had a lot of messages just generally like when we share a lot of what's the divorce and everything on our Instagram pages. I do get a lot of people saying things like, my ex just doesn't give me any money. Like, how is that allowed to happen? Like, is that just because they haven't put something in place legally yet? Or even if there is something legally in place, can someone just not pay?
Yeah. And you know what? That's the sad reality. You know, child maintenance can make provision that he has to pay or she has to pay a monthly amount. If they don't, we have a remedy. You know, CMS can get what we call an attachment to earnings order. So we go to the source. That person's HR department then pays the tax. pays the CMS, and then gives the person the balance. But what if they're self-employed? What if they get paid cash? You know, the sad reality is we can't force anybody to do anything. We can get orders that they pay us £500 a month, but if they don't do it, what can we actually do? So if you find that you're not able to trust the other person, or they're unreliable, or they're in and out of work, look for another remedy. Don't try and force that rabbit down that hole, because it's not going to work. We know that. And other remedies might be, we just take a bigger share of the savings, or the ISA, or the equity in the property. Yeah. Now, if we don't have any of that, then we don't really have another remedy. There's nothing more we can do, which is a bit sad. That doesn't happen that often, but it does happen.
No, but it's interesting to know that you can have it taken out of their wages if they're employed.
I do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had just a question I thought of, because I get asked a lot. I get a lot of messages to say, you know, they love listening to the podcast and they've been miserable and they really want to leave and get a divorce, but the financial side of it is holding them back and they're terrified of how they'll make things better.
Yeah.
What would your advice be to someone in that position?
There will always be an out. Always. You just don't know it yet. So that's why I say, if you can afford nothing else at all, get the money together to just have a one-off consultation with a solicitor, because I guarantee you, once you know your options, you'll be able to find that out. There's always an out. Always. You know, I get people coming onto my Discord and going, right, Trace, this one's a bit complicated. And in my head, I think, I guarantee you it won't be complicated. It's just that they don't know the option yet. Yeah. They don't know the out. But once you know it, it is scary, 100%, because you just think, oh my God, I'm trapped. I'm completely trapped. I don't earn. I've got nothing in my name. I've got nothing in the bank. That's me done. But that's not the case, because you are always going to be entitled to something. You know, you can't be forced to stay with somebody that you don't want to be with anymore. So there'll always be an out. Always.
Yeah, and it's sad, because I feel like that's probably what we hear the most of why people stay. Yeah. It is that financial fear of I don't work, and so I can't afford to be with my kids on my own. So they just stay in unhappy marriages or relationships.
So true.
Because of that. And we've always said it's so annoying. We sort of want to be able to give this advice and be like, no, you can, you just need to do X, Y, Z. But we haven't been able to really give that advice because we haven't known what to say.
Yeah, there will always be an out, always. And the main reason that I started to do the social media was what I found, and it really frustrates me, is that people think that lawyers are so unapproachable and they can be really intimidating. You know, when I started this, the amount of DMs I'd get, they'd be like, oh my God, I'm just so scared to go and see a lawyer. They're going to be so expensive. They're not going to understand me, blah, blah, blah. So when you're looking down that black hole that nothing's in my name, I don't work, the house isn't in my name, and then you think, well, the remedy is to see a solicitor. Oh my God, no, I can't walk into a solicitor because I've got no confidence. You know, I don't even own anything smart to wear or whatever, because they have this image that it's intimidating. We've got to sort of break down those barriers and help those people that just feel so trapped in all of that. Yeah. There are so many options. And honestly, the times that I'll speak to people and do a consultation, at the end of it, they'll say to me, oh my God, I feel so much better now. You've literally lifted a weight. And I haven't done anything. I've just given them options. That's it. I've given them an out. Do you know what I mean? They have that little bit of knowledge now.
Yeah, that's really nice. So we thought that we'd end the episode asking a question that I'm sure a lot of people will want to know is, what would you say is probably the most common cause of separation or divorce that you get from clients?
Number one would definitely be adultery. And then number two would be financial. The other person has just spent or got into debt but number one is definitely that double life scenario, having an affair. That is just so common. And people find out.
It's crazy how common it is. I mean, I know since we've certainly started this, I literally feel like it's on a daily basis, the amount of people who've come out and been like, I found out today, my husband's been leading a double life. I think before we went through what we've been through, you're so naive to it. You don't realise this whole other horrible world going on. Yeah. But I suppose you live and breathe it and see it all the time.
Yeah. And I obviously don't want anyone listening to this that's in a happy marriage thinking like, oh shit, better go and check my husband's phone. Or, you know, we very much also know that there are great, happy marriages. But it's just, I guess it's just one of those things, isn't it? And maybe it's also the world we live in now with the access with social media. And
I think so. That's always been my theory. It's just far too easy. Social media has absolutely. Yeah. But there we go.
Thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed that, ladies.
For me,
I literally feel like you've answered so many questions that have been like going around in my head. I'm sure, like as well, loads of those questions that we get asked, and we're like, we don't know. We're not experts. We're just experiencing this journey ourselves. So
no, but we will absolutely, like anyone that is listening, watching, make sure you go and follow the Legal Queen on Instagram and TikTok.
It's amazing.
So helpful. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. It's really valuable. Really valuable.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time, Tracy.
All right then. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.